समेट कर जटाओं में क्रोध की शिखाग्नि, मृत्यु की संभावनाएं समस्त आर पार कर, कृपाण की कटार की गांडीव के प्रहार की, सज्ज हूं मैं कब से धार तेज तर्रार कर। भ्रकुटी पे ज्वाला लिए सोते हुए सिंह का, धैर्य आजमाने की कदापि मत सोचना। सुन लो सारे शत्रुओं ये याचनाएं आखिरी, आज मेरा मार्ग किसी हाल में न रोकना। Now, these might have been the thoughts going into Bhishma's mind when he entered the battle, and the battle that was destined to finish the dynasty that he strived so hard to preserve. And because of his oath, he himself was on the wrong side of the battle, on the battlefield. What all the thoughts would have been going through in other characters' mind? I mean, uh, what was Duryodhan thinking when it was happening? What was Arjun thinking? I mean, we have the narration of Sanjay that has been very beautifully presented by Vedavyas ji. But and we have also probably seen some of the bits and pieces of the battle in TV serials. But considering the limitations of that medium, you only have seen very little of this battle that has been described so beautifully and in such a grand fashion by Vedavyas ji. And if you ask me personally, this is the battle that, I mean, one of the most fascinating things about Mahabharata is the knowledge and the wisdom that is preserved in the book. The second most fascinating things for me personally is the description of the war, and somebody had to take up this task, this mammoth task in hand, and Deepak ji has is trying to do that with his Kurukshetra Chronicles series. And today we have gathered here to talk about the first book in that series, and the title of the book is Blood and Iron. This book, we will now move to Deepak ji for the book, and to ask him about the what exactly is covered in the book, and what all we should the reader should expect from this book. Over to you, Deepak ji.
So, namaste to everybody. Namaste to all the viewers and good evening. So, thank you so much, first of all, Gaurav, for hosting this launch on Sutradhar. So, the background that the viewers can see behind Gaurav and Abhinav is part of the cover image of this book. So, of course, we'll show it a little bit later. So, this image has been designed by Sutradhar itself. So, thank you, Gaurav, for designing the image. And before I speak about the book, I must talk about our two guests here. So, Saiswaroopa ji, she has been a mentor to me. So, thank you so much, Sai ji, for being here today. So, in fact, it was her tweet series on the Mahabharata War that actually made me interested in the Mahabharata. I was on Twitter like everyone else for the politics. But then when I read that series, I got very interested because the war we have seen is completely different from what is there in Veda Vyasa's Mahabharata. So basically, what you have seen is a little bit of welding of arrows and color lights and all those things. But the war was not actually like that. It was completely different. So that I came to know when I read Sai Swarupaji's tweets. So that motivated me to actually try and find out what is there in the original Mahabharata. And I got hold of the KMG edition, Kesari Mohan Ganguly's translation, and that made me really interested. And then I got an opportunity through Unsung Valor. So that's the second help, or I can say encouragement that Saiji did. She gave me a chance to be a published author, so my short story was published in that book. And at parallelly, I also started working on Abhimanyu. And again, Saiji was there to help me because she forwarded my manuscript to Bloomsbury and it got published. And when I started this book, I requested her to go through it and give a recommendation. She has given a very positive recommendation that is there on the cover of the book. So once again, my sincere thanks, Saiji, for all your support and encouragement. So thank you so much for coming today for the launch. And turning to Abhinav Agarwal, he is a constant source of support and encouragement for me and for many other Indic authors. So he is one of the leading luminaries of the Indica movement, and he is always there for all authors. He is there to support in whatever way possible. When we write, he is there to encourage us. He's there to he in fact gets our books and gives it to readers so that readers can read and review it. And he has been there for me at all stages. When my previous book Mahabharata Tales was published, he was kind enough to go through one of the stories and give his feedback. And when I wrote this book, I requested him to write the foreword, and he has written a wonderful foreword. So those who read the book will get to know it. So thank you so much, Abhinavji, for being there. So my sincere thanks to all the guests. So now to come to this book, Blood and Iron. So as you can see, the title sounds a bit different from the other books related to Mahabharata. The reason is Blood and Iron depicts the cold reality of the war. So there is bloodshed, and there is iron, the use of iron weapons, arrows, bow, mace, sword, axe, all sorts of weapons. So the brutality of the war I wanted to bring out. So that is why this particular title was selected, and I wish to uh, place on record my thanks to another author, Neela Pratap Singh, who is a very prolific author. He has been pushing me and many other authors to write a series on Amazon, because how Amazon works is it recognizes a series. If you put out a series of books, Amazon does the promotion for you. So that's why he has been pushing everyone to write a series, and thanks to his encouragement, I came out with this series, and he has been, behind me to complete this series. So thanks to his push, finally the first book is out. Now this series is called Kurukshetra Chronicles. It covers the war in detail. Now there have been many books about the war, but not in so much detail that as a series. Like when we have authors writing a series on the Mahabharata, generally one or two books have been on the war. So I believe this is one of the first attempts wherein a complete series of 5 or 6 books will come out on the war. So it covers every detail of the war, and it shows the brutal reality of the war. What actually happened on the war? What were the tactics employed? What were the strategies? What each warrior did? Who died first? So all this have been portrayed in this particular series. And the first book, Blood and Iron, covers the first 5 days of the war. So the first 5 days, as we know, comes under Bhishma's leadership. So the book is divided into 5 volumes, covering each day of the war with different chapters. Now, another unique experiment that I tried out was to have a first-person narrative. So generally, novels are written in third-person narrative, so wherein the author is basically narrating and he is presenting viewpoints of what is happening in different places. Now, in this, I have tried first person narrative with each chapter being from the point of view of a different person. Like one chapter is from Sanjaya's point of view, wherein he starts narrating to Dhritarashtra. Then we shift over to Krishna is narrating, and Krishna narrates what is happening in the war. So then we move over to Arjuna, Duryodhana, Bhishma. In this way, the narrative is presented by different persons, different key characters of the epic. The reason is by doing so, we can try and see what is in their mind. Of course, I don't know what is in their mind. The only thing I know is based on what is there in Vyasa Mahabharata. But here is where I have tried to use my creative liberties, because one issue with writing books on Mahabharata is everything is there. You don't need to make a plot, you don't need to write subplots, you don't need to create characters, you don't need to bring out the traits of characters. Veda Vyasji has done everything. So he has everything ready for us. We have to just take it and present it. Now, if I write it as it is, then why will anyone want to read it? They would rather read Vedavyasa's Mahabharata or Rajgopalchariji's summary. So there has to be something, that tadka that I present. So that some creative liberties that I've used in terms of dialogues, trying to get into the minds of character. And one thing I would like to state is that every stage I've tried to ensure that the core story of the Mahabharata is not diluted. I have not made any major deviations. Like, we see stories about how Karna was in love with Draupadi, Duryodhana was in love with Subhadra, and all those sorts of things. You will not find that here. I am faithful to Vedavyasji's epic. Of course, like I said, few creative liberties here and there, but none of them affect the core of the story. So that is the highlight of this series. And each chapter goes into exactly what happened during the war. Every detail has been presented, and I have tried to keep it as engaging as possible, action packed, so that especially today's generation, youngsters, would love to read it. So I hope that youngsters read this book and then they feel like reading more about the Mahabharata and take up more books. So we have eminent authors sitting here with us. Saiji has written so much about powerful characters from the Mahabharata, and Abhinav ji is also bringing out a book on the Mahabharata that will come out shortly. So there are so many such books that readers should explore, and of course they should read the original too. So that is the objective, to make people interested in reading about the Mahabharata. And before going into the book, there is another short video which gives a little more details about this book. So I would request if it can be played. So as you can see, this is the book, the cover of the book, Blood and Iron. So probably it won't be visible as clearly. So Blood and Iron is the first book of the Kurukshetra Chronicles series. So in this book, the first 5 days of the war are presented in detail. So like I said, it is part of the series, the first book. The second book will cover the next 5 days, and then we'll go on to the Drona Parva, where the real action starts. So this is about the series, this is about the book, and I'm grateful to Saiji for giving a wonderful recommendation, which is there on the cover page. So the book is available on Amazon Kindle, and I would request all those who are viewing to please visit Amazon and take a look. You can go through my website, deepakmr.com, or any of our social media handles, including Sutradhar's handle. So you can get a link to the book. So please buy this book and go through it, and do let me know your feedback. So once again, thanks to all of you for being here today for this launch, and thanks for launching this book.
Uh, Thank you, Deepak. And it has been wonderful hosting you here. Now, I would like our guest, Saiswaroopa ji, to talk about her experience, because she has probably had a closer view to Deepak's writing process and how he has come about with this book. So over to you, Sai Swarupaji, for some your remarks about the book and how audience should, how the reader should perceive this book. You are mute, Sai.
Sure. Namaste, Srimatre Namaha, and let me begin by congratulating Deepak ji for this wonderful book. He has been too kind in introducing me. I don't think I have played such a great role in his uh, career. I think his passion is something which his passion and discipline, both of them put together have, pushed him through so many books. And yes, I do feel really glad that the tweet series has brought so many like-minded people together, and also it has it has just started this trend of very wonderful anthology series from Indica Academy. Yes, Deepak ji has contributed to two anthologies, Unsung Valor and Arya, and maybe a couple more. So yes, keep watching out for new passionate and dedicated authors like him, and now going into Blood and Iron. I loved the title, actually. One thing, it went with the trend of ice and fire, and I don't know what all that comes from the West, and the other thing, yes, it conveys the brutality of war on the battlefield. And Deepak ji was right. Especially those of us who grew up with the first generation, second generation visual adaptations of the Mahabharata, especially the war part of it. Somehow the older movies, which were very good in their aesthetics, music, and everything, I think capturing the gore of the war was not in their priority. So, and the war used to come towards the last part of it, and, they had to make it somehow more engaging and entertaining than actually brutal. So, we used to see stationary chariots, warriors just, uh, you know, uh, shooting arrows which would totally defy gravity and very politely go go in the air. And when we read the Mahabharata, it's totally not like that. The war is not like that. The war is not some choreographed series of polite duels between ranked warriors. It is total, it's mayhem, it's destruction, it's dilemma, it's just warriors battling their opponents as well as their own selves internally, battling 100 emotions as well as battling the opponents. And it was that, right? There's no, in no way we can reduce the impact, or what do you say, it's words are not enough in trying to convey the seriousness of this battle. From the Mahabharata point of view, I mentioned it in my forward, unsung valor. Bhishma Parva, Drona Parva, Karna Parva, and Shalya Parva, the number of shlokas, right? They account for more than the quarter of the whole length of Mahabharata. I think it comes to roughly 27% of the shlokas of the Mahabharata are from the war chapters. So that itself conveys how important is this 18-day war, with 18 Akshauhinis from far and wide corners of ancient India, of Bharatvarsha, the original Bharatvarsha, right? And there is one need, if we have missed something in our visual adaptations, of course, the seriousness of the war apart, visual adaptations have till date have not done justice to a 360-degree view of the Mahabharata. Each maker, each filmmaker, or each serial maker came with their own set of biases and messages. It's not, I mean, I won't say it's wrong to have them. We all have our biases, but I think we, as the enthusiasts of Mahabharata, or those of us who have read the Mahabharata in original, be it Gauravji or Deepakji or Abhinav here, all the three are more well read than me, I can assure you that. But each of us have this duty of presenting that 360-degree view of the Mahabharata, and that's exactly what Blood and Iron does. That's something which I really liked. While sticking to the original narrative, Deepak ji has tried to present it from various sides, with Sanjaya balancing it in between. I could sense that, you can sense the first person toggling, right? That's actually a tricky part from an author's perspective, to toggle a first person, because even the best authors I have seen toggle between first person and third person, and they alternate, and only with two characters. But the way Deepak ji has balanced between Krishna, Arjuna, Bhima, Sanjaya, and even from the point of view of Kaurava characters, Bhishma, all those, Drona and Duryodhana, right? And so all that gives us that kind of a 360-degree view of the war and the way the war affects each of them. the way their own, the mental state, the morning of the battle, how is the person's mental state, and how it changes through the whole, as the day progresses. And one more thing I liked what came across was the first day of the war. Yes, there, the battle, people are battling their own emotions than the opponents. And there is a loss to the Pandavas in the form of the death of Uttara, Shweta, Shankha, and all. Then the second day progresses, the luck, the tables change. That has been very beautifully toggled in terms of perspectives. And as the days progresses, we can sense the desperation grow. And that is the real aspect of war. As it progresses, everybody, I think every warrior, I know we when we read those abridged versions of the Mahabharata, we sit judging each of the warriors. Yeah, Bhishma should not have been killed that way. Pandavas broke this rule. Abhimanyu should not have been killed this way. Kauravas broke this rule. Drishtadyumna shouldn't have killed Drona that way. Nothing right happened in this war. I mean, war doesn't happen for right things, right? War happens to decide, right? War is a decider between us, dharma and adharma, and war is not fair. So war is actually where every warrior's resilience, every warrior's what do you say, restraint, and every warrior's valor, emotions, everything gets tested, and every warrior touches his high and low in terms of this war. Even I think Deepak ji will bring it out in his book 3 or 4. We'll see how the near perfect warriors like Satyaki had to touch their own moral low points, and maybe people like Karna, who have been so self-centered, they have their own high points in the war, right? And yeah, I mean, it was exciting for me to read this book in its pre-published stages, and as somebody who knows the author's enthusiasm in bringing out these stories, it's always a pleasure to be associated with people like Deepak. So it was, I consider myself privileged to see these wonderful books come straight out of author's desk to me before they go to the press. So do please give it a try. I mean, it's very easy to download. The Kindle versions, they are actually, as somebody who has been reading Kindle editions since a couple of years, I would say they are much more friendlier than paperback editions, especially for people with busy lives. Of course, there are other people with a little bit of time privileges who can curl up and hold a paperback and read. I wish I have that pleasure more often. But for people who lead busy lives, who have to commute to work, or who have a lot of waiting times, or something like that, and who can read only nights or something like that, it's so easy to download this book on your phones, and you don't exactly need a Kindle device. You don't have to invest in them, but you can download the Kindle app on your phone, and if you have a subscription to Kindle Unlimited, you can download all this whole series for free and read it, and do try and check out all of Deepak ji's books, and always do leave a review after reading any author's book. That matters a lot to every author. So that's it. So congratulations, Deepak ji. I personally am looking very forward to Drona Parva. So that's where I think the desperation in the war reaches a crescendo. The day 14, day 13 and 14, which are so action packed that even you start wishing for the war to end, the readers. So I think, if I can recollect, if I when I was going through the unabridged version of Mahabharata, I think critical edition that's translated by Dr. Vivek Debroy sir, and so there's a lot of judgment about Yudhishthira lying to get Drona down, right? And then just before that, there is this long description of the destruction that Drona was causing amongst the Panchalas. And so while reading that, I myself is like, when the hell is this guy going to lie and bring Drona down? Right? That's so that is what reading the original or reading narratives that stick to the original make you feel. They make you feel one with the characters of the Mahabharata, one with the people of the Mahabharata, and we we feel the need to get off our high moral horses and share the perspective and develop empathy, that the empathy with real people that would help us through our lives, than stay judgmental about everybody. So that's the huge contribution of reading these epics. They help us to stay humble. They teach us how the mighty can fall, how the great can fall, and they teach us how the nobodies can rise if we have, if I can mention the Shat Sampatti, the Shama Dama Titiksha Uparati, and other two. So that has been my personal takeaway from the Mahabharata, and that is the takeaway that Deepak ji's books, and tomorrow even Abhinav's book would be presenting. So thank you for this opportunity. So please do download Blood and Iron on your phones or on your Kindle devices, and even on your laptops if you feel like taking a break from your work on a weekday. It's a very easy read in the terms of the ease of reading. It's a page turner by itself, and it gives you this kind of knowledge and emotional resonance with the epic that is going to stay with you, and that is something that you are going to cherish for a long time after that. Okay, thank you, Deepak ji. Thank you, Gaurav. Thank you, Abhinav.
So thank you, Saiswaroopa ji, for joining this chat and helping us with the launch of Deepak's book.
My pleasure. My
Uh,
pleasure.
about the Drona Parv that you talked about, I usually say that Drona was committing so many fouls that the divine had decided to give him a red card because he had to be off the field. So whether it was right or wrong, whether Bhurishrava's killing was right or wrong, whether Bhishma was killed in the right fashion or not, all these are questions which are I mean, if you can call them dharma sankat or some other term you can use them, because these are the tricky situations where you can interpret in
I
any
know.
way. And
Some 15, 20 pages before the event happens, you feel like going and doing the same thing.
correct. So coming to the point that I want to present to Abhinav to talk about, and it is why one should read about the Kurukshetra War. What is so great about Kurukshetra War, and how it is relevant in modern context, and why it is important for people like Deepak to keep writing these kind of books. So over to you, Abhinav.
Muted.
Abhinav, you are mute. Abhinav, you are mute. We can't hear you.
Okay. Sorry
Yeah.
about that.
Now we can hear
Am I
you.
audible now?
Yes, correct. Go on.
Okay. So I was saying thank you, Gaurav, and thank you, Sai, for such a wonderful introduction to Deepak's book. And I will totally endorse your earlier comments that it is a very special feeling on multiple counts to get hold of a pre-production edition of a book, a manuscript of a book, for several reasons. One of which is, it obviously makes you feel special that the author has considered you, has put enough trust in you to share that pre-production manuscript version, and the critic inside me feels even more elated that I now have an opportunity of wholeheartedly criticizing someone else's work. But in Deepak's case, that was not the case for several reasons. One of which is that his knowledge of the Mahabharata, and he's too nice and humble a person to say that, but his knowledge of the Mahabharata is just incredible. So it feels doubly special to read that manuscript and then the final version of the book. Now, when it comes to Kurukshetra, I see there are a few things that come to my mind. One is that the war did not happen overnight. Even after the end of the 13 years of exile, it took several months and several rounds of discussions and parleys and negotiations, one after the other, before we finally reached to the point where the 7 and 11 Akshanis of the two sides proceeded to Kurukshetra. A person no less than Krishna himself proceeds to Hastinapur to plead for peace. And even a person such as Bhim, who had taken a vow to literally, crush Duryodhan's thighs and drink Dushasan's blood, when Krishna is going to Hastinapur, Bhim says that, plead for peace, let's not have war. And everyone is surprised. Is this Bhim talking, or what has happened? And Bhim says that I don't want any blame to come to us for having instigated this war. So it is not as if, this brings me to the point about, see, from my point of view of having written a fiction thriller, I consider the Mahabharata to be, in many ways, perhaps the greatest thriller ever written. So I get a little surprised when people feel the need to invent, to distort, to fabricate things when it comes to the Mahabharata, because I say this is a ridiculous, really a pathetic failure of your imagination that you are having to invent things. Literally, the start of the Mahabharata and the end of the Mahabharata is that whatever exists in this world is to be found in the Mahabharata, and what is not here does not exist. And if anyone has bothered to read the full Mahabharata, they will 100% agree with that. So Deepak's book, I think, brings that very well, that there you don't have to invent, you don't have to add. If you just take the Mahabharata as is and you retell it in a way that appeals to the modern audience, if you retell it in a way, especially if you take the 18 days of the war, which, as I said, they take up how many? I think more than 20,000 shlokas. You don't have to retell, everything to that same level of detail, because, as Deepak said, if you do that, then why would anyone read your book? They might as well go and read the full unabridged edition, whether it is a critical edition or the Gita Press or some other recension. Now, coming to Kurukshetra, right? It is not as if this was the first time blood was being spilled in Kurukshetra. Apart from the fact that this is a very, very holy place, and I would strongly encourage all of you to go and visit Kurukshetra. There are so many Tirth sthals there. But anyway, leaving that aside, Parashurama, right? 5 lakes of blood from the 21 generations of warriors that he killed and wiped out. He created 5 lakes, and then Samanta Panchak, right? And then he gave that earth in a way that at that point, because there were no Kshatriyas left on earth, the earth belonged to him, and then he gave it to Rishi Kashyap. So there is a precedent to an incredible amount of violence and bloodshed there. The 2 Daityas, right, Sund, Upasund, they lived in Kurukshetra at one point, and thanks to none other than Brahma's boon, they were invincible. So much so that the gods had to invent an Apsara who could distract them. So that is one point. But coming to the connection with the Mahabharata itself, it is, a delicious twist of irony and fate, and I would say incredible plotting also that the first great warrior to fall in the Mahabharata War, Bhishma, himself could basically go back a couple of generations and see, how the roots of his own death had been laid on the plains of Kurukshetra, where Parshuram and he had fought for how many? 21, 23 days over Amba. That same Amba who was cursed by Ganga to become a river, the same Amba, who gave up her life in a pyre, who literally, rage had so much consumed her, the fire of rage had so much consumed her that she literally gave up her body and was reborn as Draupadi's daughter, and then became a man, became the cause of Bhishma's death on the 10th day. So things had come full circle for Bhishma on the plains of Kurukshetra in how many? Literally 2 or 3 generations. 3 generations if you go back enough. And it is not as if there's all blood and gore associated with the Kurukshetra, but as a Tirth Sthal, there is this very famous shloka of which a few, one line is Kurukshetram Gamishyami Kurukshetra Vasamyaham. That you want to go to Kurukshetra, I will go to Kurukshetra, I will live in Kurukshetra. So it is where, it becomes essentially the battleground for not just the physical war, but it also becomes a metaphor in many different ways for the human nature itself. The demons within that we have to fight, and the enemies without that we have to fight. It becomes a stunning metaphor for that. If for nothing else, if you look at the case of, you talked about the Drone Parva as perhaps being the most pivotal and I would agree, the most brutal Parva of all, because you have now Dronacharya, a person himself who has spent his life fighting all sorts of insults, perceived, real, and so on, all his life. He is the one who now perpetrates the most brutal of violence on his side, on the other side. He's the one we lay the blame on Abhimanyu's death on others, but if you read the original Mahabharata, it is Dronacharya who tells the Kaurav warriors how to kill Abhimanyu, and he says, okay, you talk about his killing was unjust and it was unfair and all. Well, let's go back to the Mahabharata and see what Dronacharya tells Duryodhana and others, that one of you slices his bowstring, one of you kill his charioteers, one of you destroy his chariot. 6, 7 warriors ganging up against one. Duryodhana didn't think up of that. This is Dronacharya who thinks and says this. So again, it till such time as war has not begun, yes, it is your dharma to do what you can, what you must, and what you could to avert war. But once war is declared, it is your dharma to fight a war to win. And this is said by none other than Yudhishthir. The same Yudhishthir who gives a pravachan to Draupadi that ahimsa parmo dharma and all sorts of things. There's a particular context to that. The same Yudhishthir, after the war, he also says that there's nothing better and beautiful than peace, and peace is to be had at all cost, and all of that. But this is the same Yudhishthir when after the end of the war, when Duryodhana has taken refuge in the lake, and he comes out and he says, I don't want to fight, I'll give up the kingdom, I will go become a sannyasi. The same Yudhishthir tells Duryodhana, no, this is a war. Now, if both of us stay alive at the end of this war, people will not know who won and who lost. Look at it. This is the same Yudhishthir who's basically saying this is a war to the end. And the war to the end means that one must live and one must die. So when we talk of Kurukshetra, it is not some antiseptic war that happens and Krishna magically waves his Sudarshan Chakra and the enemies are destroyed. There is a particular reason why Krishna does not take part in the war. God, Narayan himself, is saying that I will be on the side of dharma, but I will not do the karma that needs to be done to fight and win the war. It is up to you, mortals, to do that. You choose to listen, that's your choice, because it's the same Krishna who gives the same advice and counsel to the Kaurav side also when he goes to Hastinapur. He gives the Kauravas a choice, he gives Duryodhana a choice, take me or take my army. He's basically saying, in a modern context, take my resources or take my intellect. And Duryodhan makes the choice that I think a lot of us would even today do. We want what we can touch and feel. We want the tangible assets, because everyone here, in Kali Yuga especially, considers himself or herself a mighty intellectual warrior, right? मैं expert हूँ, मुझे सब कुछ आता है. Kind of an attitude pervades it. And the Kurukshetra War tells us that 18 Akshahanis and Bhishma and Dronacharya and Kripacharya, Karna, Duryodhan, Dushasan, Shakuni, even Kritvarma, for example, right? Even Kritvarma cannot help you. It is intellect at the end of the day that will win you the war. So I'll just close with one part, and this, I really hope, Deepak, that you can read a couple of passages from your book, because I want to read this one passage from the critical edition, and this is Sri Vivek Debroy's unabridged translation. We talked about how gory and brutal the war is. I want to read one passage. This is Arjun. This is a description of Arjun as he is wading his way through the army, and he says, and I'll quote, this is from the Bhishma Parv: with a flood of sharp arrows, Kiriti made an extremely terrible river flow on the field of battle. The blood was the bodies of men wounded by weapons. The foam was human fat. Its expanse was broad and it flowed swiftly. The banks were formed by the dead bodies of elephants and horses. The mud was the entrails, marrow, and flesh of men. Many hordes of Rakshasas and demons populated it. The moss was formed by heads with the hair attached. Thousands of bodies were born in the flow, and the waves were formed by many shattered fragments of armor. The bones of men, horses, and elephants were the stones. A large number of crows, jackals, vultures, and herons, and many predatory beasts like hyenas were seen to line up along its banks as the terrible and destructive river flowed forward towards the nether regions. The terrible river was as cruel as a great Vaitarani, created through the masses of Arjun's arrows. That extremely fearful river conveyed fat, marrow, and blood. I mean, in modern writing, we are often told that, show, don't tell, show, don't tell. This is as exquisite an example of showing, rather than telling. So again, I'll commend Deepak's book for taking, those 20,000 odd shlokas and embarking on this project to compress them into a set of very short, readable, easy to follow, easy to understand books. The first one has come out, and as he said, it covers 5 days of the war. Now you might think that nothing great happens on the first 5 days, because this is Bhishma falls on the 10th day. But as you read the book, you will see that there is a lot of stuff happening. But as is normal in any war, a war is not decided on the first day. It takes time. There appears to be a stalemate, and then when the scales of balance start to tilt towards one side, the end comes very fast, and this is exactly what happens in the Mahabharata War. So thank you, Deepak, for sharing this draft of the book with me. Congratulations on its release. I'm sure it'll do well. And thank you, Gaurav, for organizing this book launch event and for inviting us to it.
Thank you, Abhinav. Thank you for gracing us with your presence and with your nice words. And as we all know how important it is to read Mahabharata, and how important it is to have the right understanding of the events that took place. Because of so many distortions, we often forget the right meaning that was trying Vedavyas was trying to convey. And Deepak, I mean, we know Deepak personally, and our Sutradhar users also know Deepak from the regular blog posts that we keep on posting in our Mahabharata for Beginners series. And coincidentally, in that series also, we are currently going through the war parvas. So, so currently we are doing Drona Parv here, but coming to this, we are coming towards the end of this session. But before we end, there are few questions that have been asked by our audience members, and I would like to put to the one questions is how many books are there in this series? What is the, I mean, how the, have you planned it out already, or you are saying you will plan as you go? Uh, Deepak, over to you.
Yeah, my plan is to have around 6 books in the series, but the problem is I cannot make an exact prediction, and there is a reason for that. That is day 13 and 14. So it is obvious that I have not written the entire series. So when I start writing, I don't know if day 13 can be completed in part of a book or it requires a book by itself. And when we go to day 14, there is no doubt that it requires a book by itself because that is the crucial day of the entire war and so much happens. So only when I
And
start
Deepak,
writing, I'll know. But yeah.
day 14 is not exactly day 14, it is day 14 and then the night that
Ha,
Just
follows,
night.
which is
night
one
also.
verse.
Yeah, the night also is that. Yeah, that's right. The night also gets included. So, there is so much happening that probably 13 and 14 may require 2 books by themselves, or 13 may come along with 11 and 12, and 14 one book. So, it's very difficult to predict. But I am planning around 6 books in this series. And my plan is that I'm not going to end with the war. I'll also continue with a few things that happened after the war. Like for example, in the Mahabharata, there is the Stree Parva. So wherein there is the lamentation of the women folk as well as others, which is a very important thing because it explains what happens immediately after the war. And then of course the night of the 18th day, we know that has to be there. Then there are some other events also which have to be told, which happened after the war. So I'm planning to take that up also and extend the series. So whether I'm going to do it as a part of Kurukshetra Chronicles or another series, that let us see as we progress. But as of now, 6 books is the plan. So let's see how it comes out. Of course, the second book will cover the final 5 days of Bhishma Parva with the end of Bhishma.
So thanks, Deepak. But I have one thing to say, because since we have created this game, I can't stop talking about it. So,
You
so
must say, you
there
must
are
say.
few things. So basically, the war, as we know, it was gory. There was bloodshed, and Abhinav read out a passage. You can imagine how much gore is there in the war scenes of Mahabharata. So obviously you can't expect a 8-year-old kids to read the text and go through it and have the intellect to understand it. But they also should have a curiosity for it, so that when they grow older, they have a natural inclination towards our epics, and they read it and they explore it. So keeping that in mind, we have come up with this board game called Ranbhoomi Kurukshetra. You can find about it in Deepak's books, last few pages also. Thanks, Deepak, for putting it there. One point I wanted to mention about this, based on Abhinav's remarks. So in our book, our game also, we have tried to create this board, which is basically the 18 days of event. But if you look at it, it goes from 0 to 20, 100. So everybody says how it is 18. So I say, the boss, every block, 5-day block. Yes, thanks, Deepak. So every 5-day block is for one day. And then there are 2 nights, 14th day, 14th night and 18th night. So that makes it 0 to 100. And if you go watch, play the game, and if you reach towards the 13th and 14th day, you will say that the lines becomes blurry. you will find it difficult, and there is too much action happening around that part of the board, and there is a lot of confusion and chaos basically. So we have tried to do that in our board, or bring that also in our board, that you don't know whether it's day 14 going on, have we switched to 15th day, where are we? So that's a very critical point in your book also, Deepak. And I was in Vivekji's book. I think book 6 or book 7, one of the book only covers 3 days of war. So that is how massive those 3 days were. That Vivekji has taken 800 pages to cover only 3 days. So Deepak, you have mammoth task ahead, and I would ensure our audience or readers that they are in for a very enjoyable ride. And one very important point about Deepak's book is that it talks about the perspective of each and every, I mean, not each and every, but many of the characters which are there. And there comes another questions: why this idea of using different narrators, and how did you decide which narrator to narrate which part?
See, the idea is like even Saiji mentioned, to present a 360-degree view of the war. Because in the original text, we see Sanjaya's narration. So I thought that if I could, my original idea was to write a series on the 18 Days War with one book from one person's point of view. But then I felt that it would be better if, in the same book, the perspective of different characters would be presented. For example, Arjuna is uh, uh, fighting in the war, and we present his thought process, what is happening. And during that thought process, whenever there is a break, whenever there is some other thing happening, Arjuna thinks about the past. For example, he sees Bhima sees Duryodhana. So naturally, he remembers what happened on that fateful time during the dice game when Duryodhana insulted Draupadi. So, what did Bhima feel at that time? How was his anger? So, that can be brought out. Similarly, when Satyaki's children are killed in front of him, what is he thinking of? And as we know, Satyaki and Bhurishravas are two characters we do not hear about much when it comes to TV shows and many popular fiction series, but they are very important characters. So, what is their story? What is their background story? Why is there a rivalry? So, what are these characters thinking? So, I wanted to bring out all these point of views. So, which is why I decided that each chapter let's have a different perspective, and how to decide which narrator does which part. Bharti is asking the question. So, yes, that depends on the flow of the story, flow of the narrative. For example, it is Arjuna who is doing the major action. So I want to present it from Arjuna's point of view. So when Shweta is killed, so it is Bhishma who is doing the killing. I don't want to present it from some other character's point of view. I want Bhishma to tell the story of how he killed Shweta and what he felt after the killing. Because for Bhishma, he's a veteran warrior. Killing is not new. But what could have been going in his mind? So again, I repeat, I have taken some creative liberties here because we really don't know what Bhishma was thinking in every single moment, because that is not there in Vyasa Mahabharata. But I have tried to use my imagination as an author and present that perspective. So deciding which chapter, what would be there, so is based on the narrative itself. For example, Krishna decides to charge at Bhishma. We know that it's a very famous picture of Krishna charging at Bhishma and Arjuna running behind him trying to stop. So that has to be presented from Krishna's perspective itself. So not from any other character's perspective. So that was my objective while deciding each chapter who should be the narrator. And there would be a flow going on. For example, there is a fight going on between Bhima and the Kauravas. Suddenly, Bhagadatta comes in and Bhima falls unconscious. So now Bhima can't continue the narrative because he is unconscious. So we have to switch over to someone else. So while switching over, there has to be a transition. That is when our friend Sanjaya comes into the picture. So I have used him as a transition chapter. So wherever there is a transition, so I bring in Sanjaya, who is telling the story to Dhritarashtra. So that is the structure of the series.
Thanks, Deepak. Before we close, let's take this one last question.
Yeah.
The question is on the screen. Was it a
Yes.
conscious effort to create a breezy and engaging reading experience by employing a fast paced narrative that leaves readers eagerly turning the pages?
Yeah.
So,
The answer
Deepak,
is there in
last
Neelab's
question
question.
for the night.
Yeah, it's the answer is there in Neelab's question that readers should eagerly turn the page. That is my objective, and I just want to state that I write for the younger generation, right? People who have already read the Mahabharata, so their expectations would be at a different level. So I want to set it clear that my book may not meet their expectations. So my book is aimed at younger readers and people who want to have a fast-paced book. See, today's readers, they don't have the patience to read through huge volumes. So they don't want, long introductions, long-winded, conversations. They want immediate action to take place immediately. So while writing, I try to keep that point of view. So I try to write short sentences, simple words, simple sentences, so that any type of readers can follow it easily. So essentially, I'm writing for people, mostly young people, but it doesn't mean that others cannot read it. Anyone who wants to read something quickly, like you're going somewhere, like Saiji said, you're traveling on the metro, so you have time to read. So you want to read something quickly. So if you can take up my book, you can probably finish 3, 4 chapters by the time you reach your office. So that is the aim behind my writing this book. I think
So,
Gaurav, yeah.
I am facing some technical difficulty. So,
And just one point, our friend author Pranshu has made a point about Bhishma making rules and breaking it himself. So that is one point that comes out in the book itself. There was the elaborate set of rules that both the sides had agreed, but unfortunately, it started getting broken right from the start of the war. Immediately, the moment the war started, one of the rules broke. But the biggest rule was that you will not kill an unarmed or a helpless person. You will not attack from behind. So those rules were not broken initially, but when they were broken, then the war took a major turn. So that we will see much later on during the series. So in this Bhishma's role, so we can say that he tried his best to follow the rules, though he himself broke a few of them. But interestingly, just one last point I want to add. I was attending a course on Mahabharata by Bori, Bandarkar Oriental Research Institute. So the faculty made an interesting point. He said that the Bhishma's commandership was a fox war. That means it was just going on. It was like mechanical. He would come. He had a quota. He had a target. 10,000 warriors, 1,000 rathis. So he will come finish his quota. Pandavas will come. They will defend themselves. Arjuna will make an attack. Bhima. So there were not many major events that took place. Yes, some important characters died, but not the major characters. So everything happened in the Drona Parva. So Bhishma Parva happened in a very methodical and orderly manner because of the presence of Bhishma. So that I have tried to bring out in this series. What is the role played by Bhishma? How he controlled the war? What Duryodhana felt about Bhishma's leadership? So that is a point I just wanted to come.
thank you, Deepak ji. And my message to everybody who is watching and who will watch this video in future is to go and buy this book. It is very easy to download. We will put the link in the description of this video. Go ahead, download and read it. And as we have heard from Deepak, he has intended to make it a page turner. So, and Branshu is saying read it on a metro. You will read it faster. So, so anyways, let's conclude this session and all the best, Deepak. And hopefully, we will. I have yet not completed reading the book. I have read first few chapters, so I will quickly read it. And in the meantime, hopefully by the time I finish it, you've launched the second book, and we will keep waiting for your all the 6 or 7 or maybe 8. We don't know how many of them will be in this series. So All the best, and thank you for taking up this mammoth task. And I personally believe that it is very important undertaking, and somebody had to take it, and who better than you? I don't want people like the writers of Adi Purush to take these kind of undertakings. I want people like you to take this, who respect the source material and who want to be true to the source material, and especially who want their writing to convey the message the source material wanted to convey. And that is one of the most important aspect of this book. While presenting the perspective of various characters who were fighting in the war, or maybe sitting at the sideline, but it stays true to the crux. It stays true to the events of the story. It stays true to characters of the story. You would suddenly not see Duryodhan behave uncharacteristically and do or say something which he would not have done in the Mahabharata. So that is one of the good points of this book, and that is how my personal belief is that most of the Puranic writing should be. There is enough scope to bring in your value to the literature. There is enough scope to fill in the gaps in the stories without distorting the original text. So, with that message, I would say good night to all of you, and thank you, Abhinav, for being here. Thank you, Deepak, for writing this book and giving us an opportunity to launch this. धन्यवाद.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Good
Gaurav.
night.
Thank you, Deepak.